Welcome to the first episode of the TheatreQs podcast. I'm your host, Nathaniel Wiley, but you can call me Nate. And in case you didn't listen to the podcast trailer, this podcast gives theater kids from all over a chance to ask questions to experienced actors. But before we get into the interview for the first episode, let's start with the theater fun fact. And let's make that a trend. Every episode, I'll share a fun fact about theater, and whether that's a superstition, a trivial fact, or something else, it's a fun opportunity for theater kids, including myself, to get to know theater and all of its ins and outs. So in order to share today's fun fact, I'll be reading a passage from a book written by Peggy O'Connell, a dear friend of mine, and a very talented actor. Peggy's book is Prudence Pickle Presents Etiquette for Professional Actors, which you can purchase at the link in the show notes. But here's your theater fun fact. It's about whistling. Another superstition is whistling backstage. It's bad luck. You may not whistle backstage, ever. In the olden days of theater, ages before headsets, producers would hire sailors as flymen. The seamen were accustomed to working with ropes, and therefore they were perfect for the duties of flying scenery. Handsome devils they were, too. To call cues without disrupting the show, flymen would whistle to signal when a drop, canvas scenery attached to an enormous lead pipe, rolled down. Whistling backstage in those olden days was dangerous. The superstition has stuck, so whistling backstage is not done. In 1908, the famous soubrette Miss Peony Piacenti whistled backstage. Piacenti was clocked by a falling drop, and she had annoying pauses in her performance ever since. Thus her handle, Pauser Piacenti. Special thanks to Peggy for allowing me to read that passage. Again, the link to her book is in the show notes. And now, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's guest, who will be answering your questions. Today's guest is one who has been in a wide variety of theater productions, TV shows, and more. He was in Barrymore with Christopher Plummer, was in the touring cast of The Lion King for 5 years, and was in the Music Man with me at Arizona Theater Company. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce you to John Plumpis. Let's roll the interview. I am sitting here, virtually of course, with the incredibly talented John Plumpis, and he is going to answer some of your questions and some of my questions, and it's going to be a good time. So, hi, John.
Party on.
All right.
Hey, what's happening?
Not a whole lot. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, man. How are things in my favorite southwestern city?
It's really hot in Tucson.
Not surprised. Not surprised.
Yeah, I wish I was.
But the food's still good, though, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, cool.
That never changes.
All right.
All right. Well, let's just start by sort of, I guess, you do a little introduction of yourself. So, how you got started in theater and some of the highlights of your career, in your opinion.
Some of my greatest hits.
Exactly.
My greatest hits. Well, I got started in the theater just like you did, or probably a lot of your classmates and colleagues and cohorts. I did a couple plays in elementary school, and I thought it was fun to be on the stage and everything. And but then then in high school, I liked this one girl, and she knew that I liked the theater, and she sort of encouraged me, and it was because of her that I auditioned for plays, but in high school. And then I was in Guys and Dolls, and then I was also in The Music Man. They did The Music Man for me to play Harold Hill in high school. And when I went to college, I studied politics, but I was still interested in doing plays, but it wasn't a direction that I had planned on going. And but I couldn't stay away from it. And so I started auditioning for plays. I started doing like summer theater. I got taken under the wing of a couple of actors who were visiting for a semester at my undergraduate school, which is the University of Rochester. They took me under their wing and sort of said, you know, you could do this if you got more training. So I ended up going to graduate school, and the really important distinction that happened when I was in graduate school was we got to work under some very specific, some very powerful questions. So we all know that we like to do plays because it's fun, because we make people laugh, because we find community, because it makes us feel special and listened to, etc. But the way the faculty and the way the program was set up was that acting and working in the theater was a service that you provide, that you gave to other people. And it was about how you could make things different, better. How Stanislavski said, how you could make the audience better, finer, wiser, more fulfilled members of society. And we started to do our work under three questions. One is, does the theater make a difference? What is the possibility of the theater? And who am I in the matter? So if you say that something like, this is a long-winded question, but if you say something like, if you ask the question, does the theater make a difference? And you say, well, let's try out that yes, it does. Well, then it begins to take care of certain issues and things that need to be paid attention to. For instance, if the theater makes a difference, and plays like King Lear, for instance, or Shakespeare plays or important plays make a difference in people's lives, and they allow the audience to see something new in their lives, then every word needs to be heard. So it needs to be spoken clearly. It needs to be spoken powerfully with a voice that is supportive of the sound, of the emotions that are required. So that, do you follow what I'm saying? Is that almost like if the theater makes a difference, or if we're working on something big, then we have to get the skill sets in place underneath that, and it sort of begins to let you order the things that you want to work on. Plays in the 20th and 21st century depend upon an emotional authenticity. So you've got to figure out how to achieve that and make it nothing else look like you're telling the truth, right? Who was it? Somebody said, Frank Sinatra or something like that. Acting is easy. All you have to do is all you have to do is tell the truth. And if you can fake that, you got it made. So anyway, is that a helpful, useful, long-winded old guy answer? Probably.
Yes, very, very wise. You're a wise old owl.
Cheers. My water.
So yeah, how about some career highlights? What have been your favorite projects to work on?
Oh, well, gosh, different ones for different reasons. I was in a play called Barrymore with Christopher Plummer, who is an actor that maybe some of your colleagues and your friends know, maybe they don't. He's an older man. He died a couple of years ago at 92. But I did a play called Barrymore with him. He won the Tony Award for it. And then he went on after that and won an Academy Award and has been in like 100 movies and stuff. That was interesting because I got to rub shoulders with him and other people who were his friends who came to see the show, and a big name, at least then, a big name director, uh, Gene Saks, who directed the show, also directed the movie of, gosh, The Odd Couple, Mame, a million other things. He
Oh
was in
wow.
the original company. He was in the original company of South Pacific when it was a play before it was even a musical.
Huh.
So, like, and William Luce, who wrote Barrymore, wrote The Belle of Amherst. If you've ever heard of that show,
Quick editor's note. John froze here, but what he was trying to say is I got the opportunity
to
to.
work on a play called Laughter on the 23rd Floor, which is a Neil Simon play, and I did the national tour of that after it ran on Broadway. And um, Jerry Zaks directed that, who just directed the most recent Hello Dolly and a million other things on Broadway. Multiple Tony Award winner. Um, and Neil Simon was there. I mean, you get to work with Neil Simon. It's like if I get to work with Nate Wiley, I'll be there. It's like
I don't know if
going straight to the source, yo.
I don't know if I would put myself to the same standard of Neil Simon, but
Yet. Um, the other big highlight was I did The Lion King for 5.5 years. So, which is probably what you and your compatriots are most uh, probably familiar with. I played Timon in that on the tour of The Lion King for 5.5 years, since before you guys were even born, actually, from 2002 to 2007. But I've also gotten to do some TV shows. I recently did an episode of Blue Bloods. I've done Special Victims Unit a couple of times. Uh, I did that TV show on HBO, The Deuce. I did a really cool little TV show on Apple TV Plus called Little America, which I highly recommend. So,
cool.
and a million plays at regional theaters, which is where I met you when we did The Music Man together.
Yep.
But even The Music Man, like that particular production of The Music Man, there's certain things about it that I just loved, and that particular experience and the time in my life. And so, I guess, because it's a project oriented profession, business, and you have gig to gig to gig, you're constantly saying hello and you're constantly saying goodbye. So
Mhm.
to say, like, you sort of get used to sort of letting go of stuff. So in a way, it's like after a while, you're like, was that fun? I don't remember that. We just went on to the next one and the next one and the next one after that. So it's hard to sometimes remember, like, was that good? Was that a highlight? Yeah, I guess it was, not always, but you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's such newness and there's such newness all the time that
Mhm.
it's hard to hold on to what was.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's part of the cool part, I think, about, even regional theater is you're getting to work with so many different people from so many different places.
yeah, absolutely. It's always interesting to come into a thing and be like, okay, are you from New York? Are you from New York? No. Or, yes, yes, yes. Are you from New York? No. Are you from New York? No. Are you from New York? No. Are you from here? No. I live in LA. And then you get like people who are, yeah, you're right, from scattered all over, and you get this. It's interesting because when you're in New York, of course, you think all the theater that's worth seeing is the theater that's in New York. Although I would say that's true when you're doing a play like when we did The Music Man together, that was the most important play that was happening in the United States at the time because
Yeah.
I was in it. I was busy. And so you sometimes forget. When I toured with The Lion King, I didn't really do another play for 5.5 years. And you think, after a while, you just sort of think, this is all the theater there is. This is it. You forget, and you're not exposed to, you're not listening for, you're not watching out for, because you have your whole life on the road. But no, there's great theater and there's great opportunity and there's great adventure in every regional theater.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we get into some questions that were sent in by some incredible theater kids?
Yes.
All right. Well, Evan sent in asking, and Evan is relatively new to theater. He sent in asking, how do you handle the crowd looking at you?
How do you handle the crowd looking at you? I'm assuming that he finds that uncomfortable, or maybe I don't know. Well, it's one of the basics. I think that here's a way to answer that. Evan, thank you for your question. You know, atoms are made up of these particles, protons, neutrons, and an electron or electrons that go around this thing. And when we leave them alone, they behave a certain way. But we also have been able to detect that when we study an atom, it behaves slightly differently than when we're not looking at it. When we're looking at it, it behaves slightly differently. So what is a human being made up of? Atoms. So at our most basic molecular atomic level, we are being observed. That changes our behavior. We are being looked at. And we've got to figure out a way to get okay. That's the whole conceit of being on the stage, is getting okay with people watching you. And I don't know how you do it. You have to develop a kind of uncomfortability. You have to develop a comfortability with being uncomfortable and knowing that they're watching you. But also know that when you're in your relaxed, poised state, Evan, that you can't really do anything wrong. If you're listening and you're present, the audience will accept you as you are. The audience wants to accept you as you are. So if you feel any self-consciousness up there, if you can, set it aside and put your attention on something else. Put your attention on the fact that, on the sound of your voice going into the room or something else like that. But that's the basic fact. And so you've got to get okay with that. I think you can do things to distract you, but the audience and the people watching you are another actor in the show. So if they're laughing, for instance, or they're reacting to something happening on the stage, you've got to be listening and incorporating them. So how do you handle it? I don't know. It's a given thing. I do think, though, Evan, that spending time in front of an audience will get you more comfortable there.
All right. And then Alyssa sent in and asked, where did you find your passion for acting on stage?
Well, that rolls all the way back to what I said about does the theater make a difference? What's the possibility of the theater? I think that, and who am I in the matter? I think that you can reignite your passion by putting your attention, just like you can reignite your passion in a relationship, in so many ways, by getting in touch with what got you there in the first place, and also by putting your attention on somebody else, serving somebody else. So that, always looking from what the audience wants. How would you want the audience to react in this moment? And if you want to hit them hard, or you really want them to have a big emotional reaction, then you've got to mine the play for those things and build them carefully and caringly. And the way you get to care is by connecting with and investing in wanting to make the audience come out of there with an experience that they've never had before. I always try to say, like, I want to make the theater, the kind of theater, I want to make the kind of theater that got me into the theater in the first place. So if you can see somebody like yourself going to see a play that you're in, what can you do about making it the kind of play that would have excited you to see, you know? But keeping your passion going is really a lifelong commitment, and it's really about making a difference in the world. If you want to make a difference, you'll keep whacking at it or that particular job because you want it to shift something. And I think we have a great opportunity in the theater to change people's lives, you know? So yeah.
That was a really good answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then Olin asked, when did you start doing theater, and did you expect to become successful when you started?
I started doing theater in elementary school. And part of the reason that I did it is because they started doing this operetta, and this boy like moved into the school and he was all gung-ho about doing it, and they cast him as the lead, and we got all this attention, and I was like, I want people to pay attention to me. You know, so at first it was a look at me, like pay attention to me kind of thing. And then it was more about like telling a story that the audience might see themselves in. And but it was elementary school, high school, community theater. What was the question again? When did I first start?
When did you first start,
Oh,
and
yeah.
did you expect to become successful?
I know I didn't expect to become successful. I expected to kind of no. I think when I first did it, I thought, oh, I could do this, you know, and I could be successful at this. But then as time goes on, you realize there's so many people, and so many really handsome people, and so many people who know somebody, and so many people who blah, 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 whatever, who are sexier than you, who are more skilled than you. But I think, I mean, I guess I would say that I'm successful. I'm not a star or anything, but I've made my living doing this and pay my bills doing it. So, did I expect to become successful? No, I pursued a goal, and I pursue a goal to be as good an actor as I can be in whatever gets thrown my way. But if you're looking for success, like that to me would be successful, right? But if you're looking for success, meaning that you're making a lot of money or that you're on the cover of a magazine, then that's a different kind of success.
All right, and then the last question that was sent in was, how do you make an iconic role like Timon your own without taking too many creative liberties?
Well, it's a balancing act, you know. On the one hand, the folks at Disney and Julie Taymor, who directed The Lion King, kept saying, you know, bring yourself to it, do it your own way. And then you would do it your own way, and they'd be like, no, do it this way. So here's the best way I can describe it. If you have an iconic character like Timon, created by Nathan Lane, and the character does things in a certain way that are recognizable, that are established, that appear in this movie, right? And we want to replicate it to some degree on the stage. I think some actors find this really stultifying, but I don't. If you're going to model this model this character on this character from a movie, and then you're going to model this character. Then that actor who's making it for the first time on the stage is going to model that way, and it's going to come out his way. And then a series of people are going to come behind him, and they're going to read the lines the same way, and they're going to make the moves the same way, and they're going to play the scenes similarly. A, you can't expect to put your own stamp on it. But B, the best way to put your own stamp on it is to do it as it's asked. And to the degree that I'm different from Nathan Lane, and Nate, you're different from me, and and Bob is different from Joe, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be different, even though everyone does it sort of the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I could do a part exactly the same, say the lines exactly the same way, except that the essential Nate is going to be playing that part, and the essential John is going to be playing that part, and they will show up as different as Nate and John are to one another. That's the best way I can say it, because I think it's a balancing act, and I think that you're always under pressure to, well, there's a desire to make it your own. I did not have a desire to make it my own. I trusted that it would be okay, that I was funny enough, and that I didn't always think that I was funny enough, but but eventually you trust that you're funny enough. I remember being in rehearsal and nobody laughing. Like, they laughed the first day around the table, and maybe the second day when we first put the puppets on, and then they just stopped laughing. And I was getting pretty discouraged. And Patrick Page, who was playing Scar then, said to me, and I knew him from before. He said, he's like, "Don't worry, you're funny. Like, everyone has already seen it, and they've already seen it twice or whatever, however many times they've seen it in rehearsal. Plus, they're worried about their own stuff, so they're not even no one's looking at each other's stuff. They're just paying attention to their own stuff." Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you go through a thing, and then you go through like a little crisis of like, do I even know what the hell I'm doing? Am I going to be funny? And then the first audience shows up, and you're like, oh, okay. So, yeah. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. And I know our time for this episode of the podcast is limited, but I'd like to finish off with something that I'm going to start calling the Theater Threes, because my plan is to ask this to every actor who I chat with, to ask these three questions, and they're just sort of fun little questions about you, and you can answer them rapid fire or however you feel like. So the first one is, what is your favorite musical?
Guys and Dolls.
That's a good choice.
It's not quite perfect, but it's pretty damn near perfect. The only thing that doesn't get tied up sufficiently for me is like, there's just a little bit of a blip when we jump to Nathan and Adelaide. Just the end, the way the play ends, it's a little bit of a jump for me, a little bit of a bleep for me, but the rest of it is perfect. And it's really funny.
And then the second one is, what actor did you look up to as a kid?
When I started to know anything about acting, Laurence Olivier.
And
I don't know if your listeners will know who that is. Do they? Do you know who that is?
I do, yeah. But is there a reasoning behind that, or just
Well, because he was known when I was a kid, he was known as a highly skilled, transformative, but truthful actor. He could play any part, he could reshape his body, change his voice, change his rhythm. You know, he was unrecognizable. And for me, like that was like there was something about that, like that unrecognizable, that you were so transformative, so in the part that people couldn't recognize you as yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's any actor who can do that to the extent that he did is just
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
somebody like today, like in a completely different way, because he's not a theater actor and he doesn't play with the same kind of energy and size, but like Jared Leto or Leto, however you pronounce his name, he's different in every movie. He's
Hmm.
just wildly, wildly different in every film. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, and then the final question out of the three theater threes is what advice would you give to theater kids who are looking to pursue acting?
So the question was about like, what advice do I give? See plays, see movies, study plays, study movies, study things about acting, study things about movies, um, read books about acting, take an online acting class, but be in and around as many good plays as you possibly can. Um, and in you've got to figure out eventually, for irrespective of what you decide to do with your life, but sort of like, maybe kind of like what your life's mission is. For some people, their life's mission is to make a bunch of money so they can like take their kids on vacation. That's totally like, I'm all for that, actually. Um, but others of us like want to be of service and want to ask these outward questions. And so these questions that turn you outward, that put you into action. So this is what I mean. Always ask yourself, why are we doing this play? Why are we doing this play now? What is this play really about? And most importantly, what do we want to be different in the audience when the play is over? So, for instance, this is a very simple thing, but it was measurable and it was observable. If I said to you, the thing that I want people to leave The Lion King feeling or thinking, or what I want to be different in the audience is that I want them to be even more happy they came together at the end of the show than at the beginning.
Hmm.
So, and I can see that by kids and parents laughing, kids and parents holding hands, saying, talking about the play, and wasn't that good? And were you scared? Did you love this? Did you love that? So that's a measurable thing. Um, so what do we want to be different in the audience after they've seen the show? And you may not even achieve that thing, and it can be a secret to you. You may not even achieve that thing, but it will put you to work. It will begin to put you down the road to figuring things out. So if 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 the words of the play King Lear are a discussion, so here I'll lead you through like a thing. Why are we doing this play, King Lear? Because we um, really have to examine, like with global warming and stuff, we have to really examine uh, man's relationship to nature and where our place is in the hierarchy of natural beings, the hierarchy of the universe, etc. So, and that's worth examining because then we can do a better job with our environment. And so what we want people to do when they leave King Lear is they want to have a better understanding of, we want them to observe and observe a discussion and have a better understanding of man's relationship with his creator or with nature, and where we stand and how much respect we ought to have for nature and human nature, and how we can balance that. So if people leave King Lear being a little bit nicer to their elders or their brothers and sisters, I think that's good.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this fine Wednesday evening. And yeah, that was a super fun chat. So
Thanks, pal.
thank you, John. I'm so glad we got to chat, even if it was over Jetson's video phone. I credit John for that joke, by the way. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to the first episode of the TheatreQs podcast. If you're a theater kid and you're interested in submitting a question for our next episode, Actor to be Determined, you can shoot us an email with your question to theatreqs@natewileyproductions.com. I'll see you in a couple months. TheatreQs is produced by Nate Wiley Productions and me, Nathaniel Wiley, featuring music by Joyheads. Joyheads is a Pasadena-based music group comprised of Juan Gomez, Daniel Johnson, and Jeremy King. The song that you heard in this episode is A Real Good Time. If you like what you hear on the podcast, follow the podcast and check out our website, natewileyproductions.com, for a wide variety of content, from historical series to photo galleries and much, much more. Thank you for listening, and watch out for Audrey 2. I'm talking to you, Seymour.